Welcome to episode 77 of Going Live with Good Soil. We talk about the macro markets and then Tesla. I spend a lot of time on Tesla and some other stocks we cover. I think today mostly we'll talk about Tesla and some interesting information we've come across about, Tesla China and Tom Zhu. We'd like to share with everyone who's interested. But first, let's just, I guess, the macro market. It seems like we'll just spend a couple minutes on this. Tesla is not behaving well today. I mean, the overall market is flat today. The macro, NASDAQ is flat, but Tesla's down 5 or 6%. So it's not like the macro market's dragging Tesla down today in particular. Yesterday, Tesla was kind of flat and the macro market was down 1 or 2%. So it's sort of decoupled from the macro market. Volume has been so high for Tesla. I mean, the macro market is not helping, but it's not what's hurting Tesla today in particular, right, Matt?
Yeah, and I would say that actually applies for the last 2 months or so in general. We've put out, or at least I've put out some tweets that are probably mildly critical of the way that Elon and the board has handled some things lately. And a lot of the pushback's been like, well, macro is down across the board. Like a lot of stocks are down 50%, 60% in the last year. And so Tesla's really no different. And that's true, but it completely misses the point in my mind. Tesla has outperformed every single quarter this year. They're growing earnings when a lot of the other kind of big FANG stocks are actually shrinking. Earnings are going the wrong way, and the 60% down move has happened all in the last 2 months, essentially all since Elon took over Twitter officially. So this relative underperformance is all in the last 2 months when the broader markets have been roughly flat. So my view is like all this drama, all this kind of distraction is really related to what is driving the stock down, and less so kind of macro and the FOMC. That's heard across the board, but Tesla's underpinning performance, the fundamentals, have had until 2 months ago had helped the stock to kind of stay relatively flat in a really tough market. So I don't know. It's been a weird situation for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla has not done well relative to the macro market, and the macro market's not doing well in its own record. But yeah, I mean, you look at the volume, the average trading volume of Tesla lately, it's been really high. I mean, yesterday it was like 150 million shares or so. It was like ridiculously high. The last couple of weeks it's been abnormally high. And if you look at the rest of the tech and growth stocks, they're not. They're like probably lower than average each of the last 2 weeks, except for a couple of days maybe where the market was volatile after the Fed meeting or whatnot. But Tesla, to me, it signals that there's a lot of shares changing hands, a lot of ownership changing hands, because for every buyer there has to be a seller, right? So you can't just have more sellers than buyers one day, right? So you have to match up a buyer with every seller. It just depends on what price. And so psychologically speaking, with what's going on with uncertainty of Elon, and some people are thinking that he's getting crazy, he's sort of a loose cannon at this point, making enemies left and right. I think it creates fear among people who own Tesla. And some people are like, let's get out of this. And there's sort of, when you want to sell something for a reason like that, there's sort of like an urgency, I think, typically. Whereas if you want to buy something that looks attractive, like, oh, this looks like it's pretty attractive, then maybe there's not as urgency to buy it. And so people are kind of waiting around to buy it, and it's making the price fall faster, So it's just, it's an unfortunate time for Tesla investors, that's for sure. And the macro market, there's nothing to talk about this week, really. It's kind of last week was the Fed meeting and sort of did exactly what we all expected. And I guess Tesla's the big news we'll talk about today, right?
Yeah. I think we could probably keep macro a little shorter. We do have a lot to get into on the Tesla China and Tom Zhu in particular. So yeah, maybe you can kind of tee it up with this conversation you had and some of the things that you've learned, and we can dive into a lot of the details that I think is probably going to be kind of breaking news, or at least additional color for most Tesla shareholders that I think is going to be pretty relevant.
Yeah. So I feel like the weak point among Tesla analysis I see across all of like us retail Tesla analysts is Tesla China. Like, what's really going on over there in the economy in China, and what's Tesla China all about? How is it such an efficient machine over there? Like, who are the people over there? We don't really, I feel like it's we're sort of in the dark, and we don't really know a whole lot about. So I feel like this conversation I was able to come across with someone who, knows Tom Zhu or knew him, and I think was very valuable. And I was able to speak to this person for quite a while. About some details of how Tesla China works, and the structure of it, the hierarchy, Tom Zhu. And I think this is important information because we hardly hear anything about that, even though that's over half of the margins Tesla produces, right? So I guess first off, Tom Zhu is the top guy in Tesla China. I mean, we knew that, right, Matt? I mean, everyone sort of knew that by now, I'd say. Um,
Hmm.
and but the hierarchy was not always clear to me. So there's sort of a top three people. Tom Zhu is number one. Grace Tao is number two, and then Alan. I can't remember his last name at the moment. Alan Tang, I want to say, I forget, but Alan, his first name is Alan. He's number three. But Grace Tao is number two, and Alan is number three. And those are the top three people in all of like Tesla China. Tom Zhu is like head of all manufacturing and construction. He apparently is like a super expert in construction. He had some early construction jobs in
I
Africa.
think Tom you're talking about, right?
Yeah, Tom
You
Zhu. Sorry.
said Grace. So,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, Tom Zhu. Yeah, Tom Zhu had some early construction jobs in Africa. Then he got hired by Tesla to build that supercharger network, 2013-ish, around then. And then he worked his way up, and he's like the top person of manufacturing. He knows he's like number one in efficiency in manufacturing, getting the most out of the employees that work there, and logistics too. And then Grace Tao is sort of like, I guess, in the words of Chinese, the Chinese mainland Chinese, she's called the second generation of the right generation. That's kind of the quote I took away, which sort of means that she's the child of a very, very high level Chinese government official, supposedly. And so she has great connections to the Chinese government and can help, sort of like customer relations to the Chinese government for Tesla. And every big company sort of needs that in China, apparently. So she's sort of like the key there and has a very good connection, even to the prime minister of China potentially. So that was interesting to learn. And then I didn't get a whole lot of detail on Alan. I can't recall, but Tom Zhu, he apparently works crazy hours and even sleeps at the factory a lot, similar to Elon. He's very similar to Elon, dedicating his entire life, sleeps 3 hours a night, apparently, from like 2 to 5 a.m., keeps 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., that window of time open to speak with the U.S. and Elon, daily. And then he wakes up at 5 and starts his first meetings with Grace and Alan at like 6 a.m. and works all day, every day. There's no weekends for him, apparently. He's just a nonstop workaholic. So, similar to Elon in terms of work ethic, I would say.
Yeah, in tolerance for pain. So, one of the things that was really interesting to me, and there's maybe a couple of things we want to drill down into this, but
and Matt knows about this, but I talked to him right after. I told him all, like, I pretty much just like told him everything I learned real quick, and he's, we talked for a while about it. So Matt's going to comment too, but hopefully we'll have this person back on officially, where Matt and I both can talk to the person and ask them questions. And we'll talk about that later. But Matt, go on with what.
Yeah,
what you put together too.
this is a credible source who knows this information, but obviously it's just one person's view. But like Emmett was saying, there's just so little information coming out of Tesla China that we think it's kind of worth spending a little bit of extra time today just to kind of hear some of the stuff that we're hearing. But I think among kind of Western Tesla investors and enthusiasts, there's kind of this impression that like China's a risk, and there's probably some unfavorable government treatment of Tesla, to the benefit of the domestic EV manufacturers. But this person was actually saying they kind of thought the opposite was true, and
Yeah.
Grace's work in particular was, I think, pretty emblematic of that. And essentially kind of there was a comment that Grace was kind of working directly with the government on ways to kind of stoke demand in China, which is kind of interesting and certainly different than the way you and I were thinking about it, I think, Emmett.
Yeah. I asked, like I told you, Matt, I asked them, like, well, is Tesla always going to be behind the homegrown EV makers in China? And our source said the opposite, that Tesla is always going to be seen ahead of the Tesla of the China EV makers, sort of like Apple is seen had, like a similar branding. Tesla, where the Chinese government wants Tesla China to succeed beyond its own EV makers, or wants to put them ahead for some reason. And so the demand will never be an issue. Grace Tao has a good channel to negotiate new incentives if need be. And so that's sort of what I gathered. I mean, this is one person, it'd be interesting to talk to other people as well to, who may or may not corroborate this, but this is opposite of what I believed. I mean, I believe that Tesla China would always be at a disadvantage to the local players, but it seems like it's the opposite in a way. So that was interesting to learn for sure.
Yeah, and maybe related to that, there was a story of Tom Zhu and him kind of coming up in construction. You'd think that's kind of his forte, and he'd have trouble kind of moving to a PR phase. But there was an interesting kind of anecdote that you heard. You want to maybe tell a little bit about that kind of story?
Yeah, so I was, I think everyone who's been following Tesla for a while recalls seeing like images coming out of China of some lady on a hood of a Tesla at some car show screaming about the brakes failing, and it kind of went viral over China for a while. Ultimately, that lady had to like apologize and like give money to Tesla or something like that. But for a while, it was a PR disaster within China, and apparently they lost orders measurably because of that. And Tom Zhu at the time, he was just in charge of construction, but he kind of pivoted over to help with the market. Like, there's no real official marketing or PR in Tesla China because they know Elon doesn't like PR or marketing, but they also realize there has to be some type of PR marketing, especially at this time. Tom Zhu stepped in to help manage that process to kind of get the marketing aspect or the PR, the government relations, in order to reprimand that person, to put out reports saying that they were wrong, so he was able to kind of use PR, to fix that situation. And so there is sort of like a PR department within China. They call it customer relations. Maybe this person thinks it's sort of like the function of what PR does, but instead they call it like customer relations or something like that, because Elon doesn't like PR or the word marketing or PR apparently. So, but Tesla China recognizes that it's important to have that, serve that function in some way, so that was an interesting story that Tom Zhu kind of stepped in, and he's apparently at every meeting with government officials with Grace Tao. So he plays a big part in the relations with the government. So it's not just like PR with customers, it's PR with the government. That's just as important, more important. And Tom Zhu kind of has taken charge of doing that with Grace Tao.
Yeah, and so I find that anecdote really interesting for two reasons. I mean, one is just that, like, if you're thinking of Tom Zhu as a potential future CEO, or like maybe just the global automotive CEO, the fact that he kind of came from this construction background and was able in a very short time, in a key moment of crisis for Tesla China, to just completely change his focus, change his work days from focusing on construction and like manufacturing to handling very diplomatically a kind of sensitive political and customer focused issue. So the fact that he was able to do that apparently so successfully tells you a lot, I think, about his skill set, his soft skills, and his ability to kind of learn on the fly and be a diplomatic presence. I think that's also really interesting because like that's kind of what Tesla globally is probably being most criticized for right now. With Elon, the perception anyways is that Elon's flying off the handle. He's not giving enough attention. He's poking the bear. And the impression I get from Tom Zhu is that he doesn't like the spotlight, but he's very good at kind of managing things diplomatically, very well respected by the employee base there. But also seems to have very strong relationships with the government, and has managed the customer relationships in kind of PR and communications very deftly to handle that situation.
He wants to keep what I was told a couple times is that he likes to keep a low profile. He speaks English just fine, similar to the source who was talking to me. He speaks English, very capable, but he doesn't do interviews. The only interviews he's done is with Xinhua News, like the government official. Xinhua News. That's the only interview he's done apparently in recent history, because he wants to keep a low profile. But that's just like out of respect to the Chinese government, because that's like a very high Chinese government rate, related news organization or something. So he did an interview with them recently, or well known. And another interesting thing is he doesn't dress up in suits or anything. He pretty much shows up to work in like a t-shirt, and very nonchalant. He doesn't really. I think he he sleeps at the factory. I mean, apparently. So I mean, that's pretty. He's super hardworking. Um, I mean, he's not one drawback. I asked, what I tried to ask the source, like, if you had to guess, what percentage chance do you think Tom Zhu becomes global, you know, CEO of Tesla Automotive? And I said, I think 60% chance or something. But I think I got lost in translation. I think the source I was talking to might have thought I meant like, what percentage fit do you think he is, not percentage chance? And the person said 90%. And I think they meant like he's a fit 90%. And like the 10%, he mentioned, reiterated why, yes, but the 10% off is that he's not like a software engineer. He doesn't have like software engineering background, especially. And there's a person who works with him called, there's no English name for the gentleman, but it's Wangjia or something, I think is the name, the Chinese pronunciation. And that's like the top engineer in Tesla China. And most people in Tesla China know who that is. But he's been with Tom Zhu for a while, and he's trying to work on the deployment of FSD in China eventually. So that was the only potential drawback for Tom Zhu, apparently, is that he's not like a engineer, in background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which kind of fits with this rumor that we heard that Tom might be the global auto CEO, but that Elon would be kind of in charge of design and the FSD kind of AI stuff. To me, the kind of pieces of this, these kind of anecdotal stories that we've heard from this source do kind of fit with that narrative that was leaking out a while ago, and it does seem to fit with what Elon would want to do anyway. He's kind of staying involved in like the cutting edge, kind of most important piece of Tesla's future, which is AI and autonomy, but kind of stepping down from the day-to-day role. So we don't know for sure that all this is 100% true, but it does seem to kind of pass the smell test. And I don't know, I found it really interesting.
Yeah, and I also asked about the company itself, and a couple of things that are probably not news to anyone, but I think Tesla China, the goal is to produce half of all of Tesla's vehicles globally. And they've sort of achieved that, they think, recently. And they're sort of close to that for this year. I'm not sure they'll hit that target or not for this year, but that's sort of their goal, to be like the mothership, reliable producer of Tesla vehicles globally. Even during COVID-19, they felt like they proved themselves to be able to serve that goal. And there's, 10,000 employees, mostly factory workers, and then 500 office employees, they call it. And those are, I think, 500 like executives or something. That's what I interpreted of. And I asked if they get like stock incentives, because I know you can't, as mainland China employee, you can't get, US stock, but they get RSU units, investment units. That's what you'd expect, obviously, from
restricted
like
stock units for those who are not familiar.
Yeah, so they have a plan to incentivize them to help Tesla grow. That's what I just wanted to confirm. And so there's a lot of good information. FSD, one thing I learned, I wasn't sure. I mean, I could clarify it next time I talk to this person, which I think they agreed to talk to Matt and I both next time. One thing I want to clarify more is the FSD, full self-driving technology, because we've all seen videos of some other seemingly amazing full self-driving in China already. But he seemed to say that, like, for testing purposes, the government will allow full self-driving, but that no company is actually approved for public usage of full self-driving yet, other than a few tests like here and there. And so that there's like very strict laws against that have to get changed, more strict than in the US. That's what I gathered. So it's not like Tesla's behind in full self-driving technology. It's just like the laws there for public, usage of full self-driving is further back than much of more than we thought. So anyway, that's all a lot of information. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else I'm missing. I wrote down some notes. I'm looking at my notes here. I'm sure there's other things. It was a long, like hour-long conversation I had with the guy. I wrote down a bunch of notes after I talked to them and shared it with Matt. But I mean, I guess what we invite you as our audience to do is, if you go onto our Twitter thread for a Good Soil Investor, this Spaces is announced, or in the YouTube comments. I know there's hundreds of people watching YouTube Live. If you want to put in the comments section, questions, maybe after the YouTube Live is over, put in the comment section questions you think we should ask. So just any questions you think you'd like us to ask about Tesla China, Tom Zhu, Grace Tao Allen, anything. we can ask this person, and they will do their best to share information that's, allowed to be public information. And there's nothing private they're telling us so far. And I don't think they have any private information. This is just like information. If you're a sophisticated investor in China, I think you'd probably be able to figure this stuff out.
Yep. So yeah, definitely shoot us your questions. Hopefully we'll have a chance to interview this source, like we said, and I'd love to know what's most interesting to the audience. So let us know.
Yeah. So, well, that went a little quicker than I thought. Just running through all that stuff. I mean, the next big thing, I guess, is Elon Musk and stepping down as CEO, right? I mean, that's a big deal right now. I mean, do you think he's really stepping down as CEO, given the poll results? Or there's been a couple comments he's had, like, yeah, interesting, because people have suggested, like, you should only do this poll and let verified Twitter users vote, for example. And I think that's a good idea, just to make sure it's not bots or something influencing the results, But he said, interesting idea. So do you think he'll do the poll again and make sure only Twitter Blue verified users can answer it?
I don't know. I mean, he had a similar poll a while back where he said, "I'll respect the results of this." I think that was to like sell to pay taxes or something like that. And he ended up doing the same thing. So I kind of think that he is just going to leave. Like, he wanted to leave anyways. He never wanted to be the long-term CEO of Twitter. And there's no comment about what time frame that would be. So, I mean, I think he's going to leave. I think he's probably got some plans. I think, this was not just some kind of off the cuff thing that he was thinking about. I really hope it's not Lex Friedman that replaces him, though. As much as I love Lex, he's just not the right fit. I don't know. What do you think of some of this drama and like back and forth that he had with Lex and others, and like George Hotz even said that should he leave Twitter as an intern? Yeah. That was funny.
Yeah. Well, number one, Lex Friedman, maybe I'm biased against Lex. I listen to a lot of his stuff because I like Lex's interviews, but maybe I'm biased because, like, I don't know, it's 9 months ago or something, Lex Friedman blocked me. I think it was like he's got like millions of Twitter followers, and I think some automated program he has maybe blocked me or something, because I asked him, like, are you ever going to consider interviewing Vladimir Putin again? Or so. I was serious because, in the past he'd mentioned Putin.
Yeah, it was a big thing that he talked about.
Yeah. But then after that question, I got blocked. And so I can't see Lex Friedman's tweets unless I sign in with our Good Soil Invest Twitter handle, which I hardly ever do because it's kind of a pain. So, but I do once in a while just to see what Elon's responding to of Lex. So maybe I'm biased against Lex because of that. I don't think so, though. But I honestly don't think he would be a good CEO of any company. He's got no track record. I mean, yeah, he's a good person. I would love him to be my therapist. I'd love to talk to him. And he's got great ideas, but he's totally unproven. It's totally rolling the dice with him. I mean, I'm not saying he can't be successful, but it's just like, why don't you just pick someone out of a crowd, at graduating from MIT, and that person will probably be as likely to be successful because, he's from academia, and he's, I guess he ran a successful podcast. He can show that he can focus on a conversation for 7 hours straight. That's good, but maybe that's not the right skill set. Maybe you want your meetings to be short and concise. You don't want to have long meetings that drag on. So I'm not sure, Friedman. I hope it's sort of a joke, but it seems, I don't know. I can't tell from Elon's responses. Like, Lex Friedman seems to be eager to get the job, or I don't think he's joking. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, first, just kind of starting off with, general impressions of him. Like, I am very positively predisposed to him, I would say. Like, I was not blocked by him. I don't have any of that kind of personal history. And I still think
Dr. Know-It-All apparently was too. Me and Dr. Know-It-All have something in common. We've both been blocked by Lex Friedman for innocent comments. Yeah. So I know I'm not alone, at least. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. So he's, I think he's pretty well respected. He's pretty, like, he can find a middle ground. He interviews people with lots of like very divergent opinions, and I think does so really successfully. But to your point, like, his background is in academia and podcasts and robotics, and he talks like a lot about like robots and like love is the answer and like all this poetry and stuff, which is kind of hilarious. But he's never had any experience really leading a large organization, and so I think while he may
Or
have
being
like
part
the
of a
right,
large organization at all, right?
yeah,
Being part of, I would love to see him get hired at Twitter first, maybe head of like some department, ethics committee or some other department. I don't know, just some company where some group where he has to actually work, like a real job in capitalism and see how he does, get some experience
yeah.
that way first.
Yeah, and the other thing he has, which I think Elon appreciates, is like a very high tolerance for pain. If you follow him closely, like he does a lot of these insane workouts and like David Goggins style, just
Yeah.
like thousands of push-ups, and he hardly ever
Yeah.
sleeps either. He like keeps very odd hours. So like I think he's
Yeah.
got a very unconventional lifestyle in a way that Elon would probably appreciate. But none of that I think necessarily translates over to being a successful leader of like a company with thousands of employees and needing to
Yeah.
shape the future of this company. So, but it
Yeah.
was interesting that Elon said like you must really like pain and you'd have to invest all your stuff. Are you sure you still want the job? And it sounds like Elon's going to be on his podcast later this week. So it seems like there could be something there. It's not entirely clear that Elon
Yeah.
is really considering it. And then one other thing Elon said, which I think maybe disqualifies Lex, is people who want leadership roles are the ones who should not have them. So the fact that Lex kind of put his own name in the ring,
Yeah. Right away.
Elon might be
Yeah.
thinking that's not a good sign.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think David Sachs is the only one I can think of. I mean, there's probably so many people that aren't in the public realm that would be great fits that Elon knows and has in mind, could potentially have in mind. I mean, Elon's got, somewhat of a photographic memory and remembers everything apparently. And so, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of very qualified people within the Twitter organization currently that, he hopefully has in mind, because I would think, he's had a chance to interact with hundreds of Twitter employees on various things. He's asked them to write the code and show them the code. So you would think that within Twitter, there's got to be at least a dozen people that he really respects right now, and
Yeah.
maybe one of those people. That's what I would hope. Not someone from the
Yeah.
outside
So
necessarily.
a couple people in the comments say that Sachs is too politically biased, and I think
There's
like
some truth
I
to
don't
that.
necessarily think that he's more politically biased than some other
He's just
people,
centrist. He's
but
more moderate.
he's very vocal about it. And so I think
Yeah.
like just the perception that he is too political though is probably going to be a pretty significant disadvantage to him. I almost think like a perfect scenario might be like a co-CEO thing where we've got like Jason Calacanis and David Sachs together. I don't think that would
Yeah.
ever happen, but like I think
Yeah.
that would be a way to actually get a decent amount of buy-in that they're actually trying to do the right thing, even though like those two people like hardly agree on anything, but
Yeah.
find a way
Yeah.
to move the ball forward at least on their podcast
Yeah.
relatively well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think David Sachs, like he's seen as too political. And what's interesting is Elon just replied to, I guess, Sawyer Merritt's breaking news tweet about CNBC breaking news of David Faber saying he's looking for a new CEO, and Elon just laughed at it. So what does that mean to you? Like that he's not searching, or why is he laughing at it? Because it seems like
Yeah, that seems like a strange reaction from Elon. Like, I mean,
yeah,
it seems
there's
like a
information,
pretty.
there's signal there though. We should pick up the signal. What could the signal be there?
I don't know because it seems like kind of a mundane report. Like, yeah, they're looking for a new CEO. Like everybody knows that. So what's the laughing part? Is it just
Yeah.
that like the news media is like 2 days late as always about reporting on this sort of thing, or like what is it? I
I
don't
was
know.
thinking maybe he's thinking in his head the best CEO is no CEO, and he's already made up his mind that there's going to be no CEO, and they're just going to have like a few different. I don't know. I don't know. That's what came to my mind, but I don't know. That means there's still going to have to be someone with an authoritative view or perspective that everyone has to report to, right? I mean, Elon's the owner, so you could say it's Elon, but maybe he's just not technically a CEO. Maybe he calls himself Techno King of Twitter or something. I don't know, but
Yeah, I did
yeah,
hear a story about this one company. I kind of forget. They actually didn't have a traditional hierarchy. They had like different pockets, and there was all this like research of teams of like 20 to 30 are like actually optimally designed. So there was like a guy who owned this business of I think it was like 500 people, and there were just all these different pockets that kind of made decisions in a
yeah,
decentralized way. So
yeah,
like I don't think he'd go something kind of that extreme, but I could see him just doing something unconventional and saying maybe we don't need a traditional
yeah,
CEO. I mean, we know he hates titles anyways. So,
yeah.
maybe there's like a techno king and a king of coin and a, king of tweets or
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
I mean, it seems like
It
the
could just
top
be
news
something
story right
unusual.
now. Yeah, it's the top news story out there. Elon, if you're listening to us somehow with a burner account, please come on. We'd love to have you on our spaces here. Tell us about who what you're thinking in terms of the next Twitter CEO, or if you're going to rerun the poll with blue verified Twitter check marks only, able to vote. I think that's a good idea, because actually, Stephen Mark Ryan mentioned that when he first looked at the poll, it was like 60-40 the other way in favor of Elon staying CEO, with the first several thousand votes, obviously, within a few seconds. And you would think that's a pretty good that's a pretty good distribution, you'd think. But then within 15 minutes or an hour, it started swaying, back to be 60-40 the other way. And so maybe you had it's possible, if there are some armies of bots that are hard to detect, that people triggered them to vote no enough to like sway the vote back. Because although I can't see why it would be 60-40 one direction in the first several thousand votes, but then over the next hour it gets switched back to 60-40 the other way. I can't think of why that would be.
I had
I
all
guess
my
you could
kids
say
vote. That's why.
maybe the people that vote quickest are the people that like Elon the most. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
that's
it wasn't
another.
really strange. It did almost seem like bot swarming or something like that, because it
Yeah,
changed a huge amount in like an hour or two. It was really, really
yeah,
strange.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I found that really interesting. Hey,
Mhm.
quick side note. I don't know if you saw Drew Dixon just responded, a Tesla kind of bear. He actually wants to have a follow-up conversation or sometime in May, kind of close to our 1 year anniversary. I think that'd be
Oh,
a
have
pretty
a
interesting
bull
thing.
bear debate on Tesla.
Bull
Is
bear
it Drew
debate
Dixon?
part two.
What anyone who hasn't seen that, we'll link it in the show notes of the YouTube. But we had a really fascinating chat 6 months or so ago with Drew Dixon, who is very well prepared, very well armed with information, sort of like a much smarter version of Gordon Johnson, uh, talking about Tesla, the bear case. So we're very respectful, everyone. So we'll have another conversation with him. That's
Yeah,
good.
we had a conversation with a journalist on the Prometheus app. I think that's on YouTube. If anyone wants to find it, I think Emmett and I both retweeted it. Herb
Yeah.
Greenberg. But he's like, like I really respect like some of the stuff that Gordon Johnson is saying, and like
Oh my
anyone
gosh.
that like
That's a red flag
says
when someone
that,
says
it's
that.
like such
Yeah.
a red flag. It's like, I don't think you either just are
Everything you
not following it
yeah.
closely enough, or
Everything
you're
else
just
you
like
set up to that
incredibly
point, I have to
biased.
discount. Yeah, everything else that person set up to that point, I have to discount at that point. And also, he mentioned, I mean, I'm sure Herb seems like a nice guy, but he's like one analyst or one reporter, journalist that's followed Elon longer than anyone that I really respect is Kara Swisher. She has the most even keeled. And I was like, oh my gosh, really, Kara Swisher? Like, yeah, she's followed him a long time,
Yeah.
but she's like the most left leaning journalist and ever. And so
Well,
it
like
was just funny.
it
Yeah.
did seem that Elon kind of really hit her personally with this whole, SPF donating money to her organization, her news
Yeah.
organization. He's like, just tell me the truth about what happened. And like, I don't know if you saw that, but like she had this tweet storm that was just so emotional about like what like
Oh
a
my gosh.
piece of crap Elon is, and like I used to respect you, and like now you like all you care about is money. Like it was just like so emotional. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, all right, like I
Yeah.
understand that you disagree, and I understand that's an uncomfortable question, but yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think like Gordon Johnson and Kara Swisher are not the two sources I would go to for a really good quality
Yeah.
bear thesis. I think Drew Dix is
Yeah.
a much more reasonable, nuanced
For
source
sure.
for a dissenting viewpoint.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I said Ashley Vance would be a good
Oh
journalist,
yeah,
someone that's followed Elon for a long time. He wrote the biography on Elon even, so he'd be a good person to get his viewpoint on Elon's latest tactics. I haven't seen Ashley Vance comment on Twitter or publicly, but I'd be curious to what his take is. Yeah.
yeah, and Walter Isaacson too, because I think he's been following
Oh,
Elon for
for
a long time
sure.
now, right? So he
Walter
probably has some
Isaacson for
pretty
sure.
current insights, and I think he's pretty
Yeah.
neutral as well.
Maybe we can get one of them on our channel for an interview. Walter Isaacson's probably hard. He's probably not allowed to talk about anything while he's writing the book or while he's
Yeah.
filing them. But Ashley Vance, maybe we can get on our channel to interview and get his opinion on what's going on with Elon lately. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of stuff. I mean, what else, is there anything else Tesla related or Elon related? I mean, do you think a week from now Elon will have decided who the next CEO? We're going to know who the next CEO is. I think a week from now we'll have some answer on who it is, or that he's gonna give more information. Like 3 months from now, I'll pick a new CEO. He'll give like a target date, or I think we'll have more information. I don't think it'll be like we're in the same position we are now a week from now. You think we'll have more information though for next week's
Yeah,
episode?
I do. I think, I mean, a week from now, we got the holidays coming up. We got Christmas this weekend. So it's possible that just because of, that and noise and everything, it takes a little bit longer. But I think by the end of the year, we'll know something. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if, this time next week, there's a pretty clear answer.
Okay. All right. Well, let's, is there anything else we want to talk about before we go to Q&A?
Should we touch on the Roblox metrics that were released?
Yeah.
I think so the stock was down on the 15th by 15% after Roblox released their metrics. So there's a bit to unpack there, but I was surprised by that reaction.
Move. I'm surprised by that move too. I mean, the whole market was down. Net growth tech stocks were all down 5 to 10% that day. So it just exacerbated that move down with their monthly metrics being reported. I mean, their daily active users are up 15% year over year from the previous year. So the trend is in the right direction. Hours engaged up 10% year over year. Their estimated revenue, that's where it gets tricky. The bookings and the revenue gets tricky because they've changed again a couple months ago the methodology that they're counting the revenue. I guess the what do you call when you kind of spread it out? Amortizing the bookings over more months than they previously did.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like the way they recognize the revenue from those bookings. So like if your kid buys a game card, for example, that doesn't just show up as revenue because that's on their or they buy the coins, that doesn't just translate directly to revenue because the kids haven't spent them. So there's some estimate of, how long the kids or the users, I shouldn't just call them kids, although it's mostly kids.
Yeah.
How long it takes them to kind of use all the stuff that they've bought. And so bookings in each month get spread over into some revenue.
I mean, we have to wait for their quarterly metrics, but the last couple quarters show their 17 and over age group has been increasing sequentially each quarter significantly. So that's the key as well. Like, are people sticking with Roblox after they get older? And it seems to be the case. For me, the trend is the key, and the engagement is the trend. Like, they haven't turned on the immersive advertising yet. And when they do, I think it'll be generating tons of cash. But for now, they're making money in the same type of way. They're expanding into other demographics, other markets globally that, are not as wealthy per capita. So the kids don't spend as much Robux as they do in the US and in England, where it's like fully saturated already for the kids playing, I would say. But the key is going to be the hours engaged and the daily active users. As long as that trend goes up month over month, to me, I think the big picture is Roblox is more likely to be whatever the metaverse is than any other company, in my view.
Yeah. And maybe, another anecdote I should probably share is, I spoke with a guy who actually used to work with Dave Baszucki, like back in the 90s. They were working in the same business together. And so I was just talking to him about the business, and this guy's got software expertise, which is, definitely not my forte. So I was asking him about, what does he think about the Roblox programming language, Lua, and he said he was actually surprised at how like robust that programming language is. I mean, it's something that's, I think, easy enough for kids. Like your kids are working on programming on Roblox, and so it's like kind of cool to be that accessible. But at the same time, like they're pushing through some pretty drastic changes with the way like the graphics and the kind of wearables and everything are being presented on the platform. And this guy was saying that like it's actually handling that very robust change remarkably well. So he was, I think, pretty impressed with Dave Baszucki as well, and kind of the direction that he was taking the company. So that was I had a really interesting conversation with him, and couple other insights as well, which maybe we could have him on the channel sometime too.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have an interview to talk about whatever the metaverse is or is not, and Roblox and other systems soon again. But most people are following us for Tesla. Let's go on to the Q&A, and we'll get all the Tesla Q. I'm sure, well, if someone has a Roblox question, we'll answer it as well, or Rocket Lab or Lemonade. But I'm sure most people listening are Tesla investors, upset and angry like we are about the stock down. New lows, $141. Oh my gosh. I hate when people are right for the wrong reasons, like Some of the bears have been
That's
right about Tesla going down so much, and it's down, but it's for the wrong reasons. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. And notice you actually called out Drew Dixon on that a little bit, which I almost said the same thing, but you beat me to the punch. Like, Drew was
Drew,
saying
you've
like
been
they're going to
right,
be
but for
losing
the wrong
market
reasons
share and
mostly.
like all this
Yeah.
stuff. Like, and so the stock's down like 60% or more. But like if you look at the rationale for Chicken Genius Singapore, nobody was saying they think Elon's going to be selling shares in bulk and engaging in more political controversies.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a perception that his attention will be more focused on Twitter. Like the commentary was all around sharing, falling, demand and like China's going to dry up. And now, to be fair, those are like some legitimate concerns that have driven the price down. But if you were to ascribe like how much of this is fundamental concerns versus leadership concerns, I would argue that the vast majority of the fall, at least more than 50%, is kind of related to CEO concerns.
Yeah. So again, Elon, if somehow you're out there, please come on our spaces. We'd love to chat with you. One day he'll come on some space of a Tesla investor, I bet, whether it's us or Farzad or whoever, or Omar or Sawyer or whatever. It'll be cool to see him pop into some of these spaces someday. So anyway, let's go to the first questions here. From Chase Smith on the YouTube comments, question: monthly cost for a lease is significantly less than loan amount costs. If customers start leasing, how does this impact the financials and the long term the lease ends?
Yeah, so it's not that much of a difference other than you're kind of spreading. So I mean, let's just assume you've got like a 30% gross margin on your vehicle if you sell it right away. So let's just say there's, I don't know what the number is, but like $10,000 of gross margin that you recognize in that quarter of sale. If you lease it, you are still going to be recognizing, I mean, roughly the math is a little bit more complicated than this. But you're going to be recognizing about that same amount of margin, but it will just be spread out over time. So you're kind of papering the gross margin over like a 36-month lease term. And then on top of that, there's residual value risk. So maybe the actual number is more like you get 7,000 of gross margin over the lifetime of the lease, and then you'll have the market value less your book value, whether that's a gain or a loss. Historically, it's been a very large markup. So Tesla's recognize pretty significant income or gross margins from leasing when they sell the vehicles coming off lease. So that's kind of how that impacts it. It basically just spread the impact over time, and then you're taking residual value risk.
Next question from EC on the YouTube comments: tax loss harvesting and margin calls, how much effect on the stock? I mean, I think there's a moderate effect. I mean, the tax loss harvesting, I think, primarily affects people in the US. I'm not sure outside of the US if it's as big of an impact. But in the US, I would imagine tax loss harvesting has already been done for most people, hopefully. And margin calls, I think there's certainly margin calls going on, and that's helping to contribute to some of the downward pressure on the stock price that we see. I don't know how to measure that, but I think they're both contributing. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't think they're driving the majority of the movements, but I certainly know anecdotally some people have been margin called, and there could be some tax loss harvesting. I think though across the board, people have losses on their investments this year, regardless of what they're investing in. So it doesn't strike me as particularly probable that would be impacting Tesla more than other names.
Next question from Handyman on YouTube: do you think Elon is well recently, or if something else is going on with him so he became so political? Yeah, he's definitely triggered. He's on this mission right now against mainstream media and wokeism. I mean, I feel like that's been a problem for a long time, but he's just taken it up as a top priority recently with this Twitter takeover. Just for some reason, he thinks this is the most important thing right now over the other missions he has going on. So I can't second guess him. He's a smart guy. He's done some of the greatest things in the world. It's hard to, we can second guess him, but I don't have any founding to second guess him based on his success results versus mine. So I got to sort of trust his decision on making this the most important fight right now. As much as it hurts as a Tesla investor, for humanity, it seems that this is, he thinks this is the most important thing to work on right now. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah. I think it is an important fight. Like, I don't think he's going off the deep end. There was this kind of Howard Hughes analogy I think we spoke about last week, where Howard Hughes was this like incredibly capable business leader who just went absolutely insane towards the end of his life. I don't think that's what's going on with Elon. Like, if you look at the way that he thinks about things just hyperlogically, I think it's the same sort of situation here. Where he may be getting into trouble is just that, like, changing kind of political narratives and like the fighting the woke mind virus is nothing like trying to land a rocket on a ship or achieve full self-driving. It's a soft skills problem, and Elon has a proven history at like hard skills and like sciences, and so I think he's finding that he's kind of bumbling about a little bit more than he was probably expecting. So I think he might have been surprised at like how negative the reactions have been. But it's also possible that he knows this and is just doing it anyways because he thinks it's such an important fight. So I don't want to necessarily criticize him either, because I understand the logic of what he's doing. I'm not sure if the kind of methodology is panning out the way that he was thinking it would.
Yeah, it's interesting. Elon just commented on Twitter a couple of minutes ago from Harris X Twitter post about this company. Harris X did a survey of 1,000 U.S. households, and I guess 53% say they want Elon to stay on as CEO. But also, of the people that are using Twitter, and this 61% of those people say stay on versus 39% said step down. And so Elon replied saying perhaps there still is a bot problem. And that's sort of what we alluded to earlier, that, maybe he should do this poll with blue check marks only, something to make sure that the bots can't be influencing the outcome, so I wonder if maybe there won't be a new CEO of Twitter. Maybe he's thinking he's going to, from Elon's perspective, he just sank his life savings into Twitter at a terrible price. He sold like so much Tesla. I'm sure it pained him to sell all that Tesla, but he felt like he had to shore up the Twitter deal. And I think he really wouldn't want to give it to someone else at that point. I mean, you're going to trust Lex Friedman or someone else with, your life savings work at this point, like when he can see the path himself. I mean, just because, the most angry people about it are being loudest, it seems like 60% of people that are using Twitter, according to this survey, want him to stay on as CEO. So maybe he's going to stick around based on this most recent comment. Anyway,
yeah,
we'll see.
It does seem like he's giving himself the door to keep open for keeping his spot there. So
yeah,
I don't know.
More uncertainty for Tesla stock. That's just what we need. All right. so let's go on next question. All right, from Martin Muldoon, question: why would Elon spend so much on Twitter if it is a disaster he says it is? He says it might go bankrupt. What happened to the advertisers? I mean, that's a good question. He spent a lot on Twitter. He made his price at the wrong time. If he had waited 1 month to make his price, he probably could have got it for half the price. So, we all know the market crashed a lot more after he made his offer price, but the courts sort of held him to it. And so he had to pay a lot for it. And Tesla went down substantially after that. So he had to sell more Tesla than he anticipated because the share price of Tesla was lower than, it was when he made the offer price originally. And, so yeah, I mean, Twitter. I think he remembers the recent recessions and how tough it is, and it's burned into his brain pretty good. So he knows that you gotta be prepared to go bankrupt or not to not go bankrupt. You gotta be paranoid. So he's sort of paranoid, taking all the precautions he can from a financial standpoint so that Twitter does not go bankrupt. I think that's what he's saying. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you nailed it. He got stuck paying a high price, and then all of his collateral, which was mostly Tesla stock, to fund that deal, got cut in half essentially by the time he had to fund it. And then because of the macro slowdown, partially induced by the Fed, so maybe that's where a lot of this Fed anger is coming from, but certainly not helped by his own kind of political commentary, a lot of the advertisers kind of went away. So you had this horrible situation where he overpaid for something, and then his collateral used to fund the deal got squished, and then the margin loans to or the debt that was ascribed to the deal was now at a much higher rate just because of where interest rates went, and your advertising revenue went away. So like everything possible has gone wrong on this deal. And so I think like this recent commentary that it's been on the fast track to bankruptcy since May, it's definitely accurate. Like this is not like a healthy, financially stable company, but he couldn't actually get out of the deal. I saw Andrew Bazile had a question. Why didn't he just pay the $1 billion and walk away? He legally couldn't. That was not an option. It was a binding offer because he had waived the due diligence. So he was trying to find an out with this whole counter lawsuit thing with Twitter. But all the kind of detailed legal commentary that I was reading at the time was kind of indicating that was Elon was on the losing side of that argument, and I think he probably knew that he would not prevail in that Delaware court, which is why he ultimately decided that, you know what, let's just get this thing done. I'll pay full price, and that's what he did. But it's not. It's the timing could not have been worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question from Brian from Next Big Future. How you doing, Brian? Question: do you know if the 30 to 70% IRA tax incentives for Megapack Energy, IRA Inflation Reduction Act is what we're saying, the IRA, are dollar for dollar against taxes, or are they more like tax deductions to reduce taxable income? I mean, Mad Manx would know, I think, for sure. He's been doing a lot. We had him interviewed. Matt, do you know offhand?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces of it. One is the 30% ITC, the investment tax credit. That is a direct credit that goes to the deployer. So if Tesla sells megapacks to, let's just pick a company, PG&E, and they deploy them, PG&E gets those credits. So Tesla, it's kind of an indirect benefit for Tesla just because it kind of stokes demand, and it probably gives them a little bit more pricing power. But I think it would be wrong to kind of assume that those, go directly to Tesla. But there is a credit related to manufacturing of the cells that go into those. And I do believe that is like a dollar for dollar credit that can go to offset taxable income. Now, Tesla has a huge balance of net operating losses already. So a point I was making earlier this year when we were doing a kind of a deep dive into the IRA and all the provisions is that getting more tax credits does not necessarily help Tesla financially, because they've already have this massive pool of net operating loss carry forwards, which are marked down because Tesla views it and their auditors view it as improbable that they're going to have enough future taxable income to offset those net operating losses before they expire. So, I think these tax incentives are a good thing, to be sure, but I don't think they're necessarily like massive kind of, levers that are going to impact Tesla's financials next year. And I know this is like a big thread that was going around the Tesla Twitter universe yesterday about all the stuff going on with the Lathrop ramping, how it's going to more than double Tesla's total net margin next year. And I think that's just a gross miscalculation. I don't think that's right at all.
Next question from Breakfast Pizza. Is this how a bear market feels? Can you speak on feelings associated with prior bear markets? I never have gotten used to bear markets. I've only been through a couple, like seriously, the 2008 ones. Those are the ones I had some skin in the game with investing on. So there's much wiser people that have been through more bear markets than me. And I don't know if it feels like a massive overcorrection in the stock market because of the Fed. I think a lot Amazon I saw was at pre-COVID lows, so it's we've lost more than what was gained from the COVID. When the COVID crash happened, all the tech growth stocks went up, drastically, and but now things have come down further than they went up initially from the COVID crash, and it's 3 years later. So it just seems things are overdone. I think next year the story could be deflation. I think there's a high probability next year the main financial news story will be like, oh no, deflation is killing us. Fed has to do something about it now. And Fed's going to be late to react on that and lower rates, but hopefully it's sooner than later. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I mean, we've had a like 15-year bull market, not quite that long, but so most of our professional lives has been in that time frame. I will just say, we were speaking with a much older, much more kind of experienced investor, in that he's seen a lot of these cycles up and down over his lifetime. Who's speaking to us about investing in the fund, and he is I think so wise after having kind of lived through so many of these, that his viewpoint is really that this is when you want to deploy capital. Like, fear is at a crescendo. Everybody, is just seeing the blood in the street, and oh my gosh, how much worse is it going to get? And he's got kind of a level head about this, and so I found that kind of reassuring. Now, granted, that's just one person, one kind of anecdote, but yeah, I think it's probably a wise idea to keep feelings, which was the point of this question, out of the investment process as much as possible, and just try to look at things objectively.
Yeah. Next question from Nichash Meta. Before I go on, I see Art Vandelay has a comment saying, how come you guys never mention Elon's horrible tweets when he calls people pedos or sending them to jail without proof? Why? Those are the things people hate, not his libertarian. When he called that guy a pedo, I was happy he did that, because that guy made the first, he was interviewed on some TV channel in the midst of when Elon's trying his best to like divert his SpaceX engineers and resources to try to figure out some way to send some kind of vehicle in the caves to help save the kids. But that guy's interviewed, that guy he called a pedo, that guy was interviewed on TV saying, no, they asked him, like, what do you think about Elon Musk trying to help? Instead of him saying, any help is possible, he said, no, that Elon could take that and shove it up his ass or something like that. So I was happy that Elon stuck up and fought back. Like, that guy deserved that negative press for having that kind of reaction on a TV interview, in my view. So I don't know if enough people realize that. People just see the bad that Elon does. They don't necessarily see what triggered him to do that. So that's just my thought there.
Yeah, I would disagree with that a little bit. To me, it's just a little bit of noise. Like, he could have taken the high road, even though like that guy was certainly being vulgar, and like Elon was legitimately trying to help and like devoting resources to solve a problem which could save lives. And this guy just threw him under the bus. Like, that guy is kind of like not somebody I would respect at all either. Although he was certainly doing good work trying to help them. But just Elon, in the position that he is of being a more powerful than that guy, I think probably should have taken the high road. And I think we've tried.
He didn't have to do that, but I don't blame him. I don't blame him, is what I'm saying. Like, if I was him, I would have taken the high road, but I'm not upset with him for doing that. I can understand he's human. He has a reaction. Anyway, go on. What were you going to say, Matt?
Yeah, no, I would say, though, like you and I think have tried to be critical of Elon where it makes sense to be. I mean, we're never just completely agreeing with Elon no matter what. Just personally, like, I didn't like the funding secured for 20 tweet. I didn't like what's the company, the energy company, Solar City acquisition. I think that was ill-advised. So I think there's real kind of criticism that you can throw at him, but like, how much does the good outweigh the bad? I mean, it's a crazy ratio how much Elon's good outweighs the bad that he's done. So it's just
he's
not
human.
Worth criticizing everything.
Yeah. He can say things that are, I understand he's a big hammer with 122 million Twitter followers. He's going to say things. She's not perfect, but that's what makes Elon, I think, so amazing, is that he's not a non-player character. He's not an NPC. He speaks his mind. His filter sometimes could be better, but I certainly forgive him. Like, I don't think there's anything he's done like really wrong that he hasn't, like, I don't know. Just, that's me personally. I don't think that's a major issue, to be honest. But I know he could speak more perfectly if he more politically correct, obviously. But maybe that's not what the country needs right now. Maybe that's his point of taking Twitter over, is like, people should be able to speak their minds, not be so politically correct all the time.
I think that's so refreshing, and like, that's why I'm kind of willing to take the bad with the good, because like, all these CEOs that I've used to work for big corporations, you never know what they actually think, because they're always saying the thing that sounds right, and it's so annoying. I'm like, you're just like this fake person who's got to the top by like saying the right things, and then like every once in a while you get them on like a work retreat and they've had a couple drinks, and then they'll say something, you're like, oh, that's like the real you. That's actually really interesting. I wish you would show that side more often.
Yeah, it's gonna piss some people off, but that's just how the world goes. I'd rather be in a world where people are real than saying things that don't hurt anyone's feelings ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. What was I can't have a question from Nitesh Mehta. Question: I can't emphasize enough. We have excellent demand for a Q4, and we expect to sell every car that we make for so far into the future as we can see. That's the thoughts from their Q3 earnings report. What do you think about it? Do you think that still rings true? I think at the time it rang true. I think it probably rings true. I mean, if what we learned about Grace Tao is true about how she has a good line of communication with the Chinese government, they can increase demand anytime with some new government tax incentives. That I'm not worried about Tesla China demand, and that's like the big worry right now, right? Everyone I think has had is like, what's if we had a demand wall in China? I think in Europe and the U.S. I'm not nearly as worried still because of the Inflation Reduction Act in the U.S. and Europe, it just seems like there's still a ton of demand yet to be fulfilled. Any thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, like I think big picture that probably does still ring true. I mean, I think the question is is at what price? Like, and we've been expecting them to lower prices for a while. Probably it just happens after the new year now, or maybe they wait to see what happens to demand after the IRA in the U.S. goes into effect. But the softness in China, I think, is a real concern. I mean, the insurance data that we got last night showed a decline. I think from 12,000 was the number that people were kind of looking for. I think that's what it was the week before. It was 9,000. So, softer figures than people were probably hoping. I know Troy lowered his numbers recently. So, but the question is, like, they're going to continue to produce these cars. So are they going to go from like industry low inventory of like 9 days of inventory on hand or something like that to 12, and the market's going to stay like, oh my gosh, like the demand is falling apart. Meanwhile, like GMs and Fords of the world have like 60 to 90 days of inventory on hand. Nobody bats an eye at that. So like, I don't know, what 1/4 of like inventory growing a little bit to still like by far, like lowest levels of inventory in the world. That's probably a good thing in the long term. Like if you want to buy a car now, wouldn't it be nice to be able to like go to the dealer or go to the Tesla store and see like a Model Y that you can actually drive home? Like to me, that would not be the worst thing in the world.
No, I agree. Yeah, it'd be nice to get to that point. And I think Tesla management wants to get there too. So let's do one more question. It's been about an hour. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up here. From the Ovi on YouTube comments, question: how low does Tesla PE go before value investors start buying it? At 25x trailing PE, Warren owns Apple with slower growth. Yeah, I mean, I asked the same question other than Twitter. How low does PE, did the PE for Tesla go, the forward PE of Tesla go? And a lot of people were saying like 10, like the forward PE could be very low. Temporary. I mean, a year ago, would you have thought the forward PE could be 20? You'd be like, no way. But now it seems very realistic. Maybe we're almost there right now. So it just seems insane. But we're in a very uncertain time where people are afraid to touch Tesla. I don't think it would be there for a long period of time, but I could see it reaching that for a short while until the dust clears with Elon and Twitter, and people are comfortable with the uncertainty around that and where Tesla's going, and the the Q4 earnings report and guidance for Q1 or next year. So temporarily it could happen. I think. I don't think it would be sustained. The share price would be sustained at a 10 forward PE very long, but I think it's certainly possible. What do you don't think it's possible, Matt?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's possible, but what I think is possible, and where my kind of view on the market, and I could be wrong, but I think there's a little bit of a push and pull between the bulls and the bears. Meaning, the forward PE right now, what is it, like 35 or something like that, based on Wall Street's estimates. I don't have the figure in front of me, but what I think the market is saying is they don't think those numbers are right. So Tesla's the macro concerns are going to be a lot bigger. Demand in China is going to be worse, and so the $6 or $5.50 or whatever it is that Wall Street thinks Tesla's going to earn next year is actually going to be lower than that. So with the call it the market view of the 2023 earnings, maybe it still has a PE of 50. It's just that the market thinks that next year is going to be a lot worse than Wall Street does. The Gary Blacks of the world, and I think we had a future PE or a future 2023 kind of bear case that we looked at a while ago. That was earnings around 750, something like that. So if those numbers come in that range, then I don't think it's going to be possible for Tesla to be at like a trailing PE of 39 off of those numbers. If they can grow earnings by that much in a recession, I think the market's gonna be like, oh, okay, like Tesla is legitimate. They're gonna be around to stay. And when economic conditions get better, then this trajectory for future earnings growth is going to be sustained longer than we thought. So my view is the market is kind of discounting the probability of Tesla having a good earnings figure for next year.
Okay, well, that's good. We'll see what happens. Time will tell. So for anyone who came in late, the first 30 minutes or so, we went over a little bit of macro market news, and then we talked about our findings or learnings from someone on the ground in China who's very familiar with Tesla China, who gave us a lot of interesting info about Tom Zhu and Grace Tao and Tesla China. So we talked about that. This is recorded. As soon as we end it, it's recorded, so you can go back and listen to that. But please, any questions anyone has, we might have an opportunity to interview this person again shortly. And we'd love to ask them any interesting questions you guys have about Tesla China and anything. So please email us, or don't email, send us your questions on the Twitter thread and the YouTube comments, and we'll take note and hopefully be able to get some more information for everyone. So we'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Hopefully it's not another record down day. It seems every Tuesday we're at a new record low for Tesla. So hopefully a brighter note one of these Tuesdays. All right, guys.